everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Leah Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about Mercury Retrograde. So Mercury Retrograde for November 2018. So for a start, this period really began back on the 29th of October. That was when Mercury began to enter into the shadow zone. The shadow zone is basically, it's talking about the degrees of the chart where Mercury will retrograde back onto. In other words, this is the ground. As soon as he enters into the shadow zone, this is the ground that he's going to be covering during that retrograde period. So as Mercury started to enter into the shadow zone, we started to perhaps get a bit of a slowdown. Maybe there were starting to be a few niggles with things like technology or communication, or even just sort of slightly muddied thoughts, not quite knowing what to think about certain situations, pondering. It's interesting actually that on the date that Mercury entered into the shadow zone, he was also joined up with Jupiter. This was in the sign of Scorpio, just before Jupiter left Scorpio. And so there was this idea that maybe we were doing some big thinking, some big thinking about deep and intense issues in our lives. Maybe some kind of great truths had come to light around that time, or you're starting to see something emerging from all of this sort of darkness, this murkiness within Scorpio. This year has been a bit of a strange year in some ways, because we've had this sort of relay race of all of these retrogrades with the personal planets. So we've had Mars retrograde followed by Venus retrograde, and then just as Venus is stationed direct today as I'm speaking on the 16th of November, Mercury is now about to go retrograde himself. So we've had to do all of this reviewing. Review, look over our motivations and our goals and sort of check in with whether we're going in the right direction and doing the right thing. That was all the Mars retrograde. And then the Venus retrograde has been encouraging us to really reevaluate our relationships, maybe our relationships with other people, with ourselves, looking at our self-esteem, looking at what we truly value. And also having to deal with kind of the shadow stuff, because it was in Scorpio, about how we sort of relate with each other. And there's just this feeling that we've had to be really digging deep, to get to the heart of the matter. So goals reevaluated and passions, and then the reevaluation of our relationships and sort of personal values. And now Mercury is going to take us on another journey, which is going to be sort of connected with our beliefs and what we find meaningful in our lives. And so we entered this shadow zone of Mercury's retrograde with these sort of complex questions going on in our minds, and really wanting to understand some of these shadowy issues, because it was in Scorpio. And then Mercury stations retrograde on the 17th of November. So that's 1:33 in the morning in Great Britain, in UK time. And it's going to station on the Sabian symbol, the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. So the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, these are incredible enigmas. We don't really know what they're all about. There's certainly been a lot of archaeology done, and there's a lot of speculation. There's some wonderful sort of series about alternative archaeology and so on. But when it comes down to it, there is so much that we don't know. But they're also incredibly fascinating. It's that not knowing that compels us towards them. And most of all, we kind of wonder why. Why did these ancient races build these incredible structures? How did they build them? We don't know. We don't know the technology, for want of a better word, the technology involved. You know, we even have stories about maybe there was a connection with alien life, alien technology, or was it just incredibly clever, forgotten human ingenuity? Whatever it is about, there is a sense that this symbol is very evocative of Sagittarius energy, which is mind expanding. Sagittarius wants to take us beyond what we know. It makes us have those big questions. And so what we get from this Mercury retrograde, at the beginning, it's this sense that there are really huge questions that are on our minds, and we want some kind of answers. The trouble is, those answers might not be forthcoming. One of the complexities of this Mercury retrograde is that it's going to be square to Neptune for a lot of the time. The actual square itself is not going to be until the 25th of December, so actually on Christmas Day. So that's going to be an interesting one, because one of the interpretations of Mercury square Neptune can be kind of loose tongues, sort of slipping up with words or saying something you shouldn't. And Neptune also rules out alcohol as well. So, if we like to have a little tipple around the Christmas period for those who are celebrating, we might need to just be aware of how much we're drinking and how loose our tongues are going, because, we can get ourselves into trouble sometimes with this kind of aspect. There might be some humour in it though as well. So, it's not sort of saying that the Christmas period is going to be dreadful because of this. It's more just about paying attention, because again, it's one of the difficulties that we're distracted. We're distracted with this Mercury square to Neptune, that it's going to be in play. It's already in play, in fact, from the 7th of November through to the 24th of November, it's in play. And then it comes into play again from the 25th to the 28th of December. So it's actually after Mercury has started going forwards again. But still, we've got this long drawn out protracted period, which is really difficult for me to say, where Mercury is going to be square to Neptune, and it means that we're distracted, we're finding ourselves the mind is wandering to all different possibilities. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of speculation that is going on with this Mercury square to Neptune, and in the visionary sign of Sagittarius. Mercury in Sagittarius is actually, he struggles in this sign, because normally he rules Gemini, the opposite sign. So in Sagittarius, the problem is that although it is visionary and it's very optimistic and adventurous, and there's some great qualities with Sagittarius, one of the more challenging sides to it is that sometimes we lose sight of the details. We really get the big picture, and we kind of need to check in with the big picture. And I think that's one of the big things that this particular retrograde will help us to do. It will help us all to get a sense of what this big picture of our lives is about. And we need that sometimes, we need to take a step back, literally in this case, take a step back and see what is going on around us. And that is part of the big picture. But the problem is that we can lose sight of those things that are important, and we can get so lost, Neptune, we can get so lost in all of these wild speculations, that everything becomes sort of woolly and indistinct, and we don't know what to say and we don't know what to think. And so then things begin to get confusing and we don't know what to decide, and that might cause some kind of irritability with ourselves, with other people. On the 26th of November, Mercury is going to square Mars. So a square aspect is tense, it's difficult, it forces us into a corner, we feel backed into a corner, and therefore we might feel like we want to come out fighting. Only Mars is in Pisces, soft and gentle Neptune ruled Pisces, so he's far more passive aggressive in this sign. So now we're kind of getting this situation where perhaps we're feeling frustrated, we've got this big mystery that we don't really understand, and it's really fascinating, or it's just really compelling because we need an answer, but something or someone isn't forthcoming. And there may be some little bit of passive aggression going on underneath because we don't quite know how to address it. Or every time we try to address the problem, perhaps we're misunderstood, and that causes its own frustrations as well. It's also the date, the 26th of November, that the Sun is going to join up with Jupiter. And so what we get here is this sense that there are very big questions around our beliefs. In fact, it's a little bit self-righteous, sort of negatively speaking. It can become so almost like all-encompassing that we sort of feel like, we must be right, or there's a deeply held belief that we must stick to. But Jupiter is also going to be, Jupiter and the Sun are also going to be joined up by Mercury as well. And so we get this triple conjunction going on between the Sun and Mercury and Jupiter. And so Mercury is saying, we've got to actually look at what we believe and where we put our faith. Sometimes we put our faith in the wrong thing or in the wrong person. And it's important that we address that, because otherwise we're just going off in the wrong direction, which is again a sort of Neptune-y sort of feeling, because Neptune is it's kind of like fog, it's almost like getting lost in the fog. So there's really big questions about in whom and in what we're putting our faith, what we believe in, what we're thinking of for the future, these great big questions, these great mysteries. What do we believe about life and the universe? Are we being misled in some way, shape or form? So it is a little bit kind of strange and woo-woo, I think one of the great things we could do to help ourselves during this period is to ground ourselves. We need some grounding, some good grounding. If you know your astrological chart, maybe look to see where Saturn is in your natal chart by transit, because that will show the area of life where you can really get grounded, because he's showing you where the work is and where the reality is. For all of us at the moment, Saturn is in Capricorn. So in many ways, we could say that we could use that as a touchstone and sort of really look at our practical responsibilities to help us work through some of this rather nebulous, weird energy that is going on with this Mercury retrograde. The thing is, I don't want to paint it as being a really difficult, negative, horrible picture. There are some issues with it, yes, but the other side of it is that this is extraordinarily spiritual energy. Neptune spiritualizes what it touches for a start. And Sagittarius and the global 9th house it's kind of like the house of dreams, the house of God, it used to be called as well. And so we've got this idea of this very spiritual, philosophical mindset. And sometimes, I think it is important for us to ask those big questions. Sit down and have a think about what you believe. Do you believe in God, goddess? Do you follow a particular path, a particular religion? Check in with yourself if you do. Do you still actually feel linked to that deity or that spiritual system? If you don't follow a system, that's fine too. Just have a think about, what is it that I believe? check in with what you've learned recently. Read some spiritual material. Read some of the great spiritual books, or poetry, or whatever it is that moves you in some way. Talk to people who have had different experiences, especially because Neptune rules those who are lost and forgotten. Maybe talk to or read about people who have been on that side of things. Maybe they've been homeless. Talk to a homeless person. Maybe they have, been defeated in some terrible way, but managed to come back from that point. Sometimes these kind of energies are very useful for doing sort of charitable work, so that we get out of our own space, of our own stuff, and start thinking about other people and making that connection, because Neptune also wants us to make a connection. It's a planet that's associated with merging. So we've got this very spiritual overtone, and it can be very helpful for things like practicing meditation, for example, practicing mindfulness. These kinds of things can help to remedy some of this distracted la kind of away in dreamland. Listen to your dreams, write down your dreams, including your daydreams, because this also may be important material for this Mercury retrograde. So we have this Mercury conjunction with Jupiter and also with the Sun. So that's on the 27th of November. Bearing in mind that there is still the square to Mars, so we've still got some inflammatory material going on there. Out there in the world, on the sort of world stage, there could be some issues going on with sort of challenges between different belief systems. So we might see something like that playing out, some kind of angry words, also this kind of righteousness that comes through with these particular aspects as well. We might need to be aware that there's going to be something like that in the news. And then as Mercury continues on with his journey, he will then retrograde back into Scorpio. And this is on the 1st of December. So he's going to move back in Scorpio. Now, we've already had a lot of Scorpio stuff this year, haven't we? Because we've had Venus during this very long retrograde period through Scorpio. And so we've already sort of spent a lot of time here on our fears and our shadows and all the stuff about shared resources, and issues to do with control and abuse and so on. So Mercury is kind of checking in again, going back again. Now that we've been asking all of these really big questions and looking at what is the meaning of everything, what do I find meaningful in my life? How do I perceive this world? Are my beliefs supporting me, or are they distracting me in some way? Do I feel lost? Do I feel like the future that I want for myself is going to be something that is meaningful to me? All of these big questions, now we start to go back inwards again into Scorpio, looking at, what fears may be blocking me here? What else do I need to get rid of so that I can start to move forwards again with a more open-minded attitude, and with a sort of more positive mindset as well? What else do I need to get rid of? That's as Mercury moves back into Scorpio. And then on the 4th of December, Mercury will then trine Chiron and also the North Node. So basically Mercury, the North Node, and Chiron are going to make this kind of grand trine pattern, which is a helpful pattern. It's enabling. There's a flow. So Mercury, the communicator, the mind, is now moving into this connection with Chiron, the wounded healer, that is positive and helpful. So in other words, we're getting some mental healing. We're starting to build bridges. Chiron is the one who is sort of between, his orbit is between Saturn and Uranus. So we've got this sense of building bridges. We're starting to build bridges with one another, and perhaps even piecing things together within ourselves that starts to have a sense that we're going in the right direction. That is the North Node influence. The North Node is like the spiritual gateway. It's the point of the soul's evolution. So we're starting to feel as though all of these big questions and sort of getting in touch with the big picture, which has led us to having to face some more fears and eliminate what isn't working for us, is now really starting to sort of clear the way, so that we have this sense that things are now coming together. We're starting to make these connections, and that spiritual gateway is opening. We're starting to feel as though we're able to evolve. On the 6th of December, Mercury is going to start to move forwards again. He will station direct on this date. And he will station direct in Scorpio on the Sabian symbol, the King of Fairies, approaching his domain. This is actually the same Sabian symbol and the same degree where Mercury met Jupiter on the 29th of October. So this degree is really being emphasized, the King of Fairies approaching his domain. So firstly, we've got the kind of fairy reference in this Sabian symbol, which kind of talks of the other worlds, the invisible worlds, which is interesting because Mercury's square to Neptune is also sort of reminding us of those invisible worlds. Neptune rules all of those things that are spiritual. It stands for God or deity. It stands for your invisible helpers, your power animals, your spiritual guides and guardians. So we've got this sense then that we're being put in touch perhaps with some of these unseen helpers in our lives. And that in itself can help to bring us back home to ourselves. The domain that's talked of in this Sabian symbol is just home, territory, land, the place that you are, which is also sort of within yourself. And so we've got this feeling then with this Sabian symbol being emphasized by Mercury stationing here, that we're starting to feel as though we've come home to ourselves and we feel more connected with that invisible world, the spiritual world that perhaps we've been feeling somewhat disconnected from. This concludes my reading on Mercury Retrograde for November 2018. I hope you found it helpful, and I wish you many blessings on your path.